Hello, Kennita. Welcome to Cullah. This is my number 33rd. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Yeah, we were just chatting just a second ago about both our loves of salad and everything as things were going. Talking about what your day was this morning, which I was gonna start asking about. You're mentioning. Well, hold on. Before we go right into that, I just want to say a couple words about who you are, my understanding, and you can fill in the blanks because this was technically my first time meeting you, but I've heard things about you from other people. The most recent thing I heard was from my roommate John Griffin Jr., who you might know from the band the Tape
Tape
Vendors.
vendors,
Yeah, yeah,
elusive parallelograms. Yes, a
yeah,
rock band I used to manage.
yeah. So he was telling me a little bit about that management experience you had, which is now you're the owner of Catera. Is that what that is, or is
Yes.
that okay? So
hmm
that's your management thing you're working on. But I first came in contact with you through your position in Imagine MKE for when COVID hit. Everyone was scrambling and terrified of what it would do to musicians, and I mean all the musicians, including. And you guys had this grant for musicians, and it saved like a month of rent. It gave me a month of rent during COVID, which was huge. But then I got back into contact with you through the I Voted initiative through Emily White and the I Voted Festival, which is, what is that? It's going to be November 3rd, only 2 weeks away. So it's grind time. So there's a lot to
Yes.
cover there, but we'll start with we were just talking about a new grant. I think it's important for people to know about this, but there is a new COVID relief grant, right? That's come through Wisconsin. Can you tell about that?
Yes. And so it is available to artists, creative entrepreneurs, small businesses. This is really something for the creative community, grants up to $5,000. And we're really hoping that folks apply. And so we're Imagine MKE, we're doing our part to amplify the message. Grants opened today, October 19th. So the application for that and runs through November 2nd. So super quick turnaround. But that's because they want to begin issuing out these grants as soon as possible. From what I understand, lower threshold for the creative community. I mean, oftentimes, if creatives are eligible for grants, there's so many things that they have to go through or provide proof of. That's not the case with this grant. And we're helping to amplify the message about an informational session that they're doing tomorrow that we are co-hosting. And so tomorrow, October 20th, there will be an informational session for creatives across disciplines, creative entrepreneurs to hop on and learn more and again, hopefully apply.
Yeah, it's called We Are. What is it? What is the name of the grant? We Are.
We're all in.
We're all in. That's right. Yeah,
Yep, we're all in.
we're all in. Yeah, that is quite a quick turnaround compared to the other ones from the first stage of. I think it's from the CARES Act. Is that what it is? That's the second big coronavirus stimulus that Congress did, I believe. I don't have to. There's so much complicated things about that, I'm sure. But and this is just through Wisconsin, right? So only
Right,
available
right.
to Wisconsin residents. Yeah, and all musicians and small businesses alike, from my understanding. Yeah,
And folks should apply. I mean, like I
yeah.
said, I spent the morning sending out emails about it. So you know, I think more and more folks are starting to recognize that our hospitality space and arts and culture sector is like the hardest hit.
Hmm.
And it's interesting. I did a panel last week for On the Table through Greater Milwaukee Foundation, and we had an artist named Rosie Petrie on. And she said, well, look, if people don't think that um, they're engaging in arts and culture right now during COVID, they should give up their Netflix, give up that book you're reading,
Hmm.
give up that podcast you're listening to. Um, all of those things are a part of arts and culture, and all of those folks who are producing that content, both on like in front of it and behind the scenes, all of those folks are hurting right now. So again, I hope that people take advantage of applying for this grant. Um, so we can help continue to stimulate the arts and culture sector.
Yeah, and I think this might be a grant where you don't want to wait and just try to get learn as much as you can as soon as possible because of such quick turnaround. And I did read somewhere there's only a number of small number. Well, I think it's like 10,000 or tens of thousands or something. I read somewhere not a that's not. I mean, for Wisconsin, that's a small group of people. So I think the sooner you get in, it's probably better. Although
Sooner the better.
yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good PSA and very important. It was something those types of grants and those forgivenesses and all the forgive stimulus stuff or if it's a grant or if it's a loan or if it's whatever it is, they're all worth looking into. Most musicians don't realize they're sole proprietors, but they are. And they're eligible or technically is considered in these grants as an employee, like a sole employee or a sole proprietor. Whether you have an LLC or not, you still should apply if you're a working musician.
Yep, I think they do ask you for an EIN. I'll have to dig deeper on that after this call, actually, so I can learn more about the grant as well. But yeah, I mean, definitely.
Because EIDL had a grant for 1,000 where I just put my information in. I was just a business as sole proprietor. I put my social security number in. I do have an EIN, but they were saying for their sake, how their system was made. I originally put my EIN in, and they were like, no, please, if you're a sole proprietor, put your sole. So I had to go back and amend it. Thankfully, they caught that, and it was amazing. And then I just got $1,000 grant for just doing that, and so
every little bit helps.
Yeah, that's a big help. That's a very big help. Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah. Turning to more pressing matters, we got 2 weeks until an election, a big election.
Yeah.
Might be the most awful election in my lifetime that I can remember in terms of people's spirits and morale and stuff. It feels like, at least, and I'm sure the COVID has a lot to do with it, but other things were there already before that. Can you tell me? I know you're on the board of I Voted, right? Can you tell me how you got involved in that and why you wanted to get involved?
Yeah, so actually, I connected with Emily White 2 years ago. So the 2018 elections, I was putting together a civic engagement initiative called Our City, Your Vote. And it was leveraging independent musicians, specifically Black and Brown artists, to get out the vote in communities of color, with communities of color, millennials, and hip hop consumers. And so my angle was really local elections, and happened to be reading an article, saw Emily's name for hashtag I Voted as a national initiative. And so her and I connected, and I asked her if she would be willing to sponsor my local initiative. And it was really just helping with promotional support. And if we could somehow line it up where one of the artists who performed at my event could then perform on the hashtag I Voted stage in November. So my event happened on voter registration day that September, National Voter Registration Day that September. So, I mean, I'd like to say we've built a working relationship and friendship since then. I mean, she introduced me to her mom, who is to some extent a bit of an organizer and very engaged in civic engagement. And so she was a resource to me as well in getting the word out. So that's how I got involved. And then 2020 election. So that's how our relationship started. This election season cycle, she asked me if I'd be open to being a board member. And I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm pretty much down for most of the things that Emily asked for. I know of her stature in the music community, but also, she does quality work. So, yeah. And again, somebody I consider a friend and have a great working relationship with. And so anything I could do to lend support to that. So yeah, so that's how I became a board member.
I mean, that makes perfect sense, though. I mean, you're already doing the same things, might as well join together, right? Yeah. So what? Yeah. What do you feel about I read somewhere you wrote or talked about the importance of engaging with people with different opinions or different. I think maybe I saw on Ben Slowey's podcast or something. He wrote something about that.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to get different viewpoints. And I think social media and algorithms
Hmm.
have a way of keeping conversation siloed. So I appreciate a good discussion
Right.
on understanding other viewpoints. Not that it would necessarily change my viewpoint, but I think it allows me to understand where other folks are coming from. And so I'm open to those conversations as long as they're not harmful.
Right.
So yeah, and I think that when we think about elections, I think local elections is incredibly important. Again, much like my initiative, it doesn't matter how you vote. I think it's important to understand why you're voting and understanding the impact of some of these down ballot races. And so, what does it look like for your alder person? Like, what is it that they actually control, and how does that impact your everyday life? And so, even me, somebody who's voted honestly, in every election, I was super nervous about the April primary.
Mm.
Actually, I didn't vote in the April primary, the April race, because my ballot didn't come. And so, and I was too scared to go out and
Yeah.
actually vote. So that's the first election that I've missed since I turned 18 and was able to vote.
That was such a terrible day that day. I remember seeing the pictures and the lines of out the door, and everyone's in masks, and this peak COVID. No one still even knew, like
Yep.
the to what. We still don't really know everything, but we know a little bit more now. But yeah, that's really unfortunate you didn't get your ballot. So I wonder how many other
Yeah.
people that happened to.
And I don't know if it was a matter of it came late, or, but I never got it. I didn't get it in time to actually
Right.
vote. And I was stuck with a decision in April. Like, well, do I, don't I? And so I chose not to, because I do have pre-existing conditions. So I
Yeah.
just wasn't willing to risk it. I just received my ballot for this
Oh wow.
election on Friday. So I completed it, and it is on my to-do list to get down to one of the drop-off sites and put it in the
Mm.
little mailbox. But I've done my thing. So I'm gonna take a picture of myself at the box, so that I can register for hashtag I voted. Yeah, which is happening November 3rd.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. I think they're announcing some of the lineup soon, but
Yeah, we have quite a bit of Wisconsin artists on there.
yeah,
You have Webster X, who this summer had that whole Black is Beautiful bike
yeah, I
ride
was in one of
that was
those.
picked up by a lot of national media. Classic, who, I think is an incredible artist. Be Free. So I
Yeah,
would say that
it's
this
huge.
year, Emily White and the team, they worked super hard to, and I was telling her this last night on the phone, that I think, with COVID, folks had options, right? There was the pathway of like, oh my gosh, stick my head under a blanket. And I
Hmm.
will be the first to admit I was there
Yeah,
for several
I was
months.
too.
So even while I was sending out the emails for Milwaukee artists for the Artist Relief Fund through Imagine MKE, when I was not on the clock, my head was definitely under a blanket. I just did not know how to process what was going on or even how to move forward.
It's
But
terrifying.
I think there's another group of folks who recognize that this was an opportunity to pivot and pivot the content. And so now, what was once 2 years ago a series of simultaneous shows happening across the country, now it is a webcast of shows from artists across the country, all coming to one spot. So you get to experience some incredible music, and it's free. And it's free whether you are registered to vote, whether you're old enough to vote. If folks go to ivotedfestival.com, they can RSVP and be ready to rock out. It's been a while since folks have been able to experience live music, so this is a good opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking. I'd like to say I'm looking forward to the election, but I don't think I'm looking forward to that. But I am looking forward to it being over and to be playing music, like at that live cast, the live stream of it all. So that should be fun.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. And yeah, I mean, I think this is an interesting time for, I was talking to a friend of mine over the weekend, and I was saying over the past, three generations, so our generation, my parents' generation, and let's say my niece and nephew's generation, we've not really experienced anything like this with COVID. So the idea of you can't go outside and play, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. We've never really had to make those types of decisions. So this, I think, is hard on everybody. But power to the folks who make the decision to go out and vote on November 3rd. I'm hoping folks are able to absentee vote and use that as an option. But for those who decide to go out and vote in person, I mean, I think that's incredible.
I think there's more. There's been more like, and maybe I don't know. I guess I can't compare it. 4 years ago, I wasn't in the country. I was in Ireland at the time during the last election, so I didn't see what it was like here. But the 4 years before that, I don't remember there being as much energy towards voting. And like, I feel like really, there's just been a giant, like, I see it everywhere now, and I see it. Maybe it's always been that way, but I've just been hearing of close friends and personal relationships I have with people that are even through it all, like volunteering to work at the polls and like doing all this stuff to make it happen. And I think it's beautiful. And I was able to send my absentee ballot, thankfully, a week or so ago, maybe even a little bit. So, and you can go on the Wisconsin myvote.wi.gov or whatever it is, and see and make sure that your ballot was received when you send it, which is a handy thing. I like that. Well, first time I discovered it, I was like, how did I not know about it? And I have my whole voting history and everything of like, well, not what you voted for, but when you voted.
When you voted, yeah.
Which, that would kind of defeat the purpose of the secret ballot. But
right.
Yeah, I think there's something in this election that's gotten people galvanized. I'm sure there's reasons why. There's definitely a lot of I like what you say about like being able to understand people's points of view as opposed to agreeing with them. I think that's like a huge, and not to put people in silos, because I think that's part of this overall just like feel of this election is just people's demeanor towards each other and their straight up hatred. It feels like I think of a lot of it comes from people who are very afraid of either it's the virus or of the economy or of the people, the powers that be, and all those things, and they're afraid. And like, I think it's these types of larger voter turnouts and what you've done locally and what Emily and all these amazing people and the initiative are doing to try and stir the people to come out and vote. Because I've read in the last 3 or 4 elections at least, almost half of people, if not sometimes more than half of people in these last few elections, national presidential elections, don't even vote. That the largest majority of voters is usually, or plurality of voters, are non-voters. And so I think, and that's something that is, I think, I don't know, people talk about it, but it feels rarely like, for me, there is of course all the issues of fraud and all these things that people say, which doesn't seem, from I read the statistics, doesn't seem like there's been a lot of fraud. It seems like it does happen from time to time, but the mail-in ballot's very divisive now. It's become politicized and stuff. But I've heard that people in the Civil War voted by mail, and I think even Donald Trump votes by mail. So, but
I think the other thing is because we're all kind of more or less confined to the house, right, the election and COVID and the economy are now all we're surrounded with. Right. Which, if we had other things to do, if we were going to shows and if we were, if we were living our lives in the way that we lived it prior to, I would say, like early March, I don't know if this would feel the same. If the urgency would feel the same.
Yeah, I saw a meme earlier today or yesterday or something where it was just a person carrying a ball of just like seasonal depression, and then someone came on over and like threw a ball of COVID depression, and then someone came in like, and they just kept throwing the balls, and they just, their arms were just full of all these balls that were of emotional issue. I think that's what and that's what Webster X was saying at the Black is Beautiful thing, that it was all about just getting out there in the wind and just doing something together, some activity, just moving, just doing the basic, like the primal and the primal communion of just moving together and just appreciating and stuff. And so, I mean, that was an awesome ride. I'm sure I wasn't able to make the second one, but the first one was really fun. I went to parts of Milwaukee I never went to in my life, or let alone biked. Maybe I don't bike enough. I think that's the answer.
Are you Milwaukee born and raised?
I am. Yeah. Well, I grew up in the suburbs. So I grew up in Glendale, like by Bayshore Mall.
Yeah.
And so when I was in high school, I was able to take the bus and go to but I only went and hung out in the east side. Occasionally in the third ward, but I didn't really engage too much. And then I went to Marquette University. But it was very, talk about a silo, very, very insular. It seemed like when I was there, at least in the engineering school, it was very much a bubble. It was in a whole surveillance state, straight up. Like there's video cameras on every corner, and and they had their own private police force that was like everywhere. And it was crazy. I mean, we would go down to the third ward and stuff occasionally, but I pretty much just stayed there for a while, but then when I graduated, then I started to explore much more I moved to River West, and that's when everything changed. Then I was able to be on my own too and commit to being a full-time musician and have to explore the city. And that's when I truly understood what it was, even though I had this feeling, I had a feeling of pride and sense of home here. But after Marquette, I went to Trinity College in Dublin for about 1.5 years or 2 years to do a master's in music and media technologies, and then I came back, and that's when I discovered what home was when I left. It's when I left, and then I heard someone 1.5 years in, I heard someone with a northern Wisconsin accent or something, just walking, a tourist or something, and I got a flood of emotions when I heard it. I was like, whoa, this, just hearing the way that someone from back home would talk, or someone that I never experienced that before, because I was never homesick. I had a great time there. I've missed my family, of course, but we would chat a lot. But yeah, then that sense of Milwaukee, and then I came back and I got to know more about the People's Flag, and then I started to engage in the scene, and because I was like, okay, if I'm going to be a musician, I've heard these things of if you can't make it in your hometown, then you can't make it anywhere, or you shouldn't, or whatever. Or I had the most network here already because I'd lived here, so I was like, this is an obvious place. And then when I realized how much rent and the cost of living was, I was like, oh, this is actually doable for a musician. This is actually doable. Then there's not a lot of places that are doable, it seems like. And so,
but I think that depending on the genre of music you do, right? That can make it less doable. I'm a huge advocate for having roots in Milwaukee and staying in Milwaukee. As somebody who was born and raised here, I can honestly say that was not always the case for me. I was definitely, after high school, trying to find a way out. And my mom was like, no, ma'am, you need to be here. And so, I mean, I think with my work with musicians and branding and artist management, I found that for some groups, it's easier to navigate those systems than others. I think by and large, though, there's gaps in the system. There's no specific blueprint or series of blueprints that helps an artist get from point A to point B. So I think for me, I'm often thinking about what are those gaps? And so why don't we have a PR agency specifically for independent artists? On the one end, we could posit it's because, an independent artist may not necessarily have the budget for that. But then what you have is independent artists now, again, speaking across discipline, attempting to build their relationships on their own while trying to be a creative. And so, I'm really intrigued with the idea of what does our arts and culture scene look like post COVID and during COVID, and what does it look like when we've added some of these additional pieces in, that helps a musician thrive, that helps a visual artist connect to opportunities. Because from my vantage point, those are some of the things that's missing. In addition to something that you actually brought up earlier, this idea of sole proprietorship. A lot of artists aren't really even having those conversations. So sometimes even when the price of admission or entry or whatever is low, a lot of our artists don't necessarily have that thing just yet, just because no one's told them they should have it, or no one told them how to acquire it. And so I'm really, really curious about that, and what is my role, both with my company Catera, but also as director of artist support and outreach through Imagine MKE. What is my role in making sure that those systems are there, and that the education with artists on the other end is there, so that we can make sure that, artists are really able to thrive in Milwaukee and beyond. Because this is a really cool place to live. It's a cool city. We've got a ton of, I feel like we're a small city with big city amenities. And the cost of living is incredible when you think about what it might be in other places. So I'm an advocate for staying here, doing work here, but also creating opportunities for you to do work elsewhere. But come back home to Milwaukee.
Yeah, you got to have the roots, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a Carl Jung wrote a quote, maybe this isn't totally applicable. He said that a tree whose branches reach to heaven has roots into hell. So it's like, and I'm not calling Milwaukee hell, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, but like you said, it feels like when it's your home, it's all you know. And sometimes it's really easy to get to, and that's what I felt. I was like, I need to get out. But yeah, always seem to come back here, and year after year, I fall more in love. And I really, really appreciate what you're just saying there, and how, and your perspective on the creative community, particularly involving the mindsets of the artists in town. And I feel like I totally agree. And I think people aren't having certain types of conversations, and they're not really, artists aren't really talking about, what's the business side of things, or like, what's this? And I think a lot of it is there is a hesitation because they see it as the antithesis of creativity sometimes. Like the creativity killer is the legal, once you get into the system, man, it's something that everyone has to navigate. Like you said, there's no blueprint, like for any particular, everyone has a different journey. But just there's nothing, like you were saying earlier about like a difference of opinion, right? Like being open-minded is that sense of I can listen and appreciate what something, some information that someone has to say. It might not be right. Maybe it's right. Maybe I feel like it's justified, but you should be at least willing to listen and try to understand it. And I feel like the same can be said about listening to business advice about, that music business, especially when you're working for yourself. It's not as crazy and complicated and soul-sucking, I think, because once you learn the knowledge, once you have that tool, it just becomes second nature. It's like anything else. It's just it's part of normalcy, and then you can focus back. It's just a learning curve, like anything. And I appreciate the work you're doing to try and spread that knowledge. But I'm curious. So what you mentioned something about how it might be harder for artists in different genres to navigate. Can you expand on what you meant by that? I'm curious.
Of course. Milwaukee is one of the top segregated cities in the country. And the reality is that you see that across sectors. That's just the truth. And so there aren't, I think some of our other genre counterparts, our rock, our Celtic space, folk, polka, they have some historic venues that have been around for decades. So, your Kohanskis, your Linnamans, your Shank Hall. These are historic venues, right? That and so in the hip hop space and the R&B space, that's not necessarily the case. There's a couple performance venues on the north side. Um, so you have like a Mr. J's that was started by the late Mr. Arliss Jones, who, in terms of the Black community, um, a great deal of his work was in nightlife for Black folk. And that's really what he did. So performance venues, sports bars, it was places for you to congregate. He passed a few years ago from cancer, but that in our venues change often. So again, when I was managing artists, Company Brewing was Stonefly, and we had Mad Planet, and you had Quarters, and they played hip hop, but every few years those venues change. And maybe they only play a certain type of hip hop, or maybe, and we have venues in the city. I won't name these venues out, but there's venues in the city that won't play hip hop or have to call it top 40s for other reasons. And so I think for me, what I learned from artist management is that, one, a lot of the artists I was working with, they just wanted to get on. They just wanted an opportunity. They just wanted to perform. And something that we were just talking about, this idea of understanding the business. If you made the conscious decision to not understand the business, then you need to have a budget to hire people who do understand the business, because you need it. So you're either willing to invest the time to learn it, and that's an option when the money is not right. But if you don't want to invest the time, then your money has to be on point, because you have to have somebody on your team that can help you navigate that. But I think that's what moved me into branding to some extent, understanding that for some artists, the opportunity to perform was not going to be as high, depending on the genre that they were doing. My one of the first acts that I managed was a skateboard hip hop group. And so we were really palatable on the east side, but trying to get some of these north side venues, two Black men with skateboards, like, they were like, what is this? Like, this doesn't sound like the music we would typically hear on the stations that folks listen to on the north side. And so we had to do a lot of work to be able to get in there. So it's not as easy. It's not as easy to book some of these larger festivals, again, right. Depending on your genre. Somebody like, and I mention this all the time, so I'm totally comfortable saying this publicly, also because I've said it to this artist, Classic. Classic is one of those incredible artists who's been able to build a long-standing career as a Milwaukee-based artist, but it's because he understands that, right? So you may see he's a classically trained musician, and so he can adapt his music in a way that feels good in a club, but also feels good on a Summerfest stage, that also feels good at a Chill on the Hill. And that's really important, I think, for folks who to understand that. Whether it's something you choose to make a part of your model of doing music is a completely different discussion. But I think that's what's helped him to be successful. It's how he's able to, do a cover for, oh my gosh, what institution was that? Milwaukee Art Museum. The Hell We Now Sing Joy exhibit that came out about 2-3 years ago. Classic was a part of the promo for that. He did a cover of This Land Is Your Land.
I think
that ramped up to that.
It was definitely a real old folk song, I remember.
Yeah. And so, but again, like, I think as an artist, he's found that balance of how to be palatable, to introduce his music, to introduce his brand to different venues. And again, as a Black artist, there aren't a ton of venues for you to choose from in the same way that some of our colleagues in other genres have that flexibility in that range.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And Classic is coming on the podcast next week, actually. So
yay, that's so great.
So I'll ask him about all that. I think that that's a good point too, with just the flexibility of the art in general. And of course, there's definitely demographic and lines drawn in Milwaukee. I mean, that's like one of the things I learned it as a kid and growing up in a very, predominantly white neighborhood. It's changing slowly in my neighborhood now. It's much different than 15, 20 years ago, but still, like in Glendale, is more is definitely more of a mixed demographic than some other North Shore suburbs. But
But it's weird because I still feel uncomfortable in Glendale. And so I grew up
there's different
near
parts of it.
Glendale.
There's like totally different. There's parts of Glendale that are like seem way more bougie and like definitely walled off and stuff. And then there are parts that are more open on Silver Spring and like Silver Spring and Green Bay and stuff area, like that are. I mean, there's lots of different pockets of it for sure. And I'm not a Glendale expert, but
Well, I think there's pockets all over Milwaukee, right?
Yeah.
Like there's pockets and cultures and yeah, I used to this when COVID first hit. So like between April and May, I would actually jog at Bayshore Mall in the mornings. So the outside. And one day I got really nervous because I recognized I had on all black. I had a black hat on. I had a scarf on. And I was running. I ran behind the Coles over by the post office. And I was coming out of that alley. And I saw a woman gardening. And I had my hands in my pocket. And I immediately started to freak out. Because, this is after the Ahmaud Arbery murder in Georgia. And I just like immediately when I saw her, and I don't even think she looked up and recognized me, but immediately when I saw her, I was like, oh, snaps. I'm coming out of an alley behind Kohl's, not during business hours. My hands are in my pocket. How do I become palatable to this woman who's gardening to make sure I get back to my home on the northwest side of Milwaukee without incident? So I mean, those moments are very real, real for me.
Yeah, that's not the first thing people should be thinking. I think, like it shouldn't be that way. But I agree. Like there's definitely a lot of that history in Milwaukee. That's what I was saying. Like I was told that the segregation statistic as a kid, and I went to Nicolet High School, and but I went to a private grade school, and it was predominantly all white. There was a couple kids from Africa actually, who were from Africa, and then occasionally we get some other kids from different countries and stuff. But they would either stick around for the whole while, or someone would just be. There was a lot of turnover. It was a very small school, St. Eugene in Fox Point, and I only had 20 kids in my class. But then when I went to Nicolet, it was totally different because I was able to experience culture and people from all different parts of Milwaukee, from all different religious backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, all that stuff. And it was just like so eye-opening and so like it's just food for the soul, for real. Like I was able to like really question, like talk about being open-minded, like really able to question a lot of the beliefs and things that I thought growing up and stuff. And one of my English classes, the English department at Nicolet is really good from my experience. My great aunt actually taught there. I don't know if it was good when she was, but it's good when I was there. And we reread Huckleberry Finn, like with a diverse group of people, and we had to vote on like whether we say certain words or whether we don't, like what all that means and like I couldn't think of another situation that I would be in other than that would have an actual dialogue about history and the importance of like understanding that I remember feeling so moved and so like shook by those conversations, and very grateful for those conversations to be had in schools like that, like. Yeah.
And so for me, I was not aware of the segregation in Milwaukee. I did not grow up in a predominantly Black neighborhood at first. So my parents purchased a home on Milwaukee's north side in 1987. We were one of 3 Black families on that block. And we are now the entire neighborhood is predominantly Black, but of the original homeowners, it's my mom and our neighbor, Mr. James, and his wife, who stay 2 doors down. They're still in the neighborhood, and he plows the alley every winter and still. And
Wow.
I mean, he's up there in age. And so yeah, I think for me, I really started to learn about the history and the segregation of Milwaukee when I became a public ally. Our first week of service,
What's a
we
public
did like
ally?
a tour of Milwaukee. I'm sorry.
What's a public ally?
Oh, so Public Allies is this program through AmeriCorps,
Hmm.
and it's a service program. And so 4 days a week, you are partnered with um, a community organization. So I was partnered with the White House Project, which at that time was based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And they basically held trainings all over the country for women to run for office, whether it
Oh, wow.
was your PTA president to president of the United States. They offered training to help you navigate that. And then on Fridays we had like learning together as a group. And so our first week we took a tour of Milwaukee in the Bayview area, learned about Joshua Glover, and that was amazing to me. And then a few years ago, I read the book Selma of the North. And I actually had a little book club. And so me and my friends, we all read it. And Selma of the North is really Milwaukee civil rights history.
Really?
And so it was incredible. It talked about when MPS, Milwaukee Public Schools, actually became integrated. It talked a lot about the 200 Nights of Freedom, but with the Commandos, NAACP Youth Council, Father Grappy, the late Father Grappy, and the late Vel Phillips, but also how Milwaukee came to be. So how did it become segregated by religion? Like that was it at first. It was religion. And then how did people of color start to migrate into Milwaukee? So an incredible book just on Milwaukee civil rights history. And
It's called
I bring
Selma
up the
of the
200.
North, right? Selma of the North.
Yep, Selma of the North, which is how we were referred to because of a lot of the civil rights activity that was happening here in Milwaukee. And I mention that because the 200 Nights of Freedom is the housing marches. It's what allowed my family 20 years later to purchase a home on the north side of Milwaukee, deep in the north side of Milwaukee. 20 years prior in 1967, that would have been absolutely illegal, and my parents wouldn't have been able to establish that small piece of wealth for my sister and I. So really fascinating. And Selma of the North is a factual account. And I'm a bit of a history buff. I'm a PBS girl. So yeah. So like it was a fantastic book. And then from there I read The Color of Law, which was about the redlining that happened across the country that, led into how Black and brown families wound up living in literal toxic areas, how housing was developed there. So I think having these factual accounts of history for me is important because as a creative entrepreneur, it then allows me to find my place in that equity piece of it. So I think for me, my work with Imagine MKE and my work with Catera this is equity work. This is how do I do the extra work to be inclusive to artists of color? How do I make sure that they are represented and at the table as well, while also working with other artists? Because it's not about exclusivity, it's about inclusion. Right. With that equity piece, though, making sure, understanding, that sometimes we have to do a little bit extra to make sure that everybody has a space.
But those are great book recommendations because part of the love of Milwaukee, you get and is to understand where why it is the way it is. And I think my grandpa said something like that. He's always said you got to know where you've been to know where you're going. And I feel like history is such an important part of our worldview and like of our entire perception of reality. is when you know the historical context of things. I think that's part of the divisive issue of why everyone is so at each other's throats sometimes, because no one really knows what the historical context is. They'll say one politician did this. It's like, well, they did that 20 years ago and 10 years ago and 15 years ago. Like, it's not really that crazy. People be saying it's really crazy. Just one example. But the second book you mentioned, The Color of Law, is that what you said? Mm-hmm. About redlining. And that takes place over a certain period of time that book goes into, or is it talking specifically about the like Reconstruction era migrations and like movement of it? Or
so Color of Law does talk about it gives the historical context of how we wind up where we are today with housing issues, and specifically what role the government played in that. So
that's a United States account, or like specifically in Wisconsin, or all? Or
no, United States.
Okay,
United States, because redlining was federal. So things like if you owned a home as a white person, it was written into your deed, and there's still some folks who own homes that have this in their deed, that you couldn't sell it to a person who was Jewish. You couldn't sell it to a person who was of color. Wow. So it really interesting. And again, just from a historical context for me, it helps me to find my footing. It helps me to understand what I'm seeing and experiencing, and it gives me directive on how to move forward, to kind of to do my part to erase some of that.
So then how do you see that? Because you mentioned about culture and arts, right? Obviously. So it seems like that's might be part of the solution, at least that you focus on, like to try and erase these more the stains, or like try to include things and try and fix some of these obvious issues that are happening. Is that because you also mentioned things about, there's obviously voting too. So maybe that's part of there's the political engagement and the cultural engagement. And is that what you think, like this part of those solutions can be, is through political activism and cultural change through art?
I think the art piece for me is I believe that everyone deserves to make money doing work that they love. For me, I just, if you have a dream, I think you should have the tools to pursue it. And for me, with my experience, I've interned and worked in radio. I actually started off as a freelance journalist. So my very first nationally published article was published at like age 15. So I started off as a writer, moved into creating press kits for artists, because that was a gatekeeper, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm writing for these national publications, but there's artists here in Milwaukee who did not know that they needed a press kit in order to get into XYZ publication. And so I started writing bios for hip hop artists for free and connecting them with a photographer, because again, with my national experience, I'm receiving national press kits that these Milwaukee artists don't have access to. They don't have access to that knowledge. And so I think for me, it's about how do I share the knowledge that I have with folks who could use it? And how do I serve as a convener to make sure as opportunities come up, folks have access so that they can do work that they love to do and get paid what they want for it. Once you get engaged in that work, you realize that part of the problem is the systems. There's systems that prevent that from happening. And so how do you advocate for better systems? How do you work for better systems? Or how do you just create your own system that is able to thrive as its own thing to support artists? And so with my company, that work was always primarily musicians. I expanded it to, include politicians and other creatives. But my work at Imagine allows me to do that work across disciplines. So it allows me to engage with visual artists and podcasters because they're part of that creative artistry as well, photographers, like the whole ilk, right? So that, I think, for me, it's about connecting opportunities. The sector I choose to do that in is the creative space. And the same with the civic engagement. For me, I think I recognized that there was a disconnect between musicians and politicians, specific or civic engagement, I should say, specifically the 2018 elections. I saw so many artists having these conversations about getting out the vote and those types of things. And I was curious as to why they weren't working with a nonprofit, why they weren't doing advocacy work, why they weren't knocking doors, and where was that disconnect? And for the nonprofits that I spoke to, the disconnect was time and money. If they had someone, a convener, who could educate an artist on how to talk about this advocacy item, or if they had the money to pay this artist to help with this advocacy item, that would seem like an option that was more available to them. But when you're in the work, you're not thinking about these other things. And I've found that I'm always kind of thinking about those other things. I'm always kind of thinking about the intersectionality. So again, that, I think, working in the creative space and finding the intersectionality points is just, it's my role in the system.
Sure. Yes, it sounds like you're pretty focused on, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe focusing on individuals, like more so, or like you talk, maybe that's just your management work and stuff, but it sounded like you're focusing on individual and empowering individuals to try and.
I think empowering individuals and also working to understand the system and create the system. And I think having my own company and also having this role at Imagine MKE allows me to do both simultaneously. And so, yeah, but I mean, also content creation. So through Catera, I have a show called Artist Eats. And so to your point about the individual artists, I've learned over the years that sometimes it's difficult to just work with one or two artists. So I actually don't manage anymore. I try to work with clients on brand strategy, but the big goal for me is to put all of my knowledge into workshops where artists can engage on demand at a lower price than hiring me on to manage their campaign, because it allows me to widen the playing field of who gets access to the information. I don't want to be a gatekeeper to the information. I want to share it so that I can spend more time learning more information so that I can circle it back out into the universe. And so, it seemed to me, I'm thinking more about how do I create systems within my company that folks can engage with. Again, Artist Eats is a piece of content where I interview local artists at a local restaurant. And again, how do you create the platforms and the ways for folks to engage as a whole versus just one artist paying you and this other artist paying you? That leaves a huge gap of folks who have the information they need to advance to whatever their next level is.
Sure. Yeah, I imagine that makes perfect sense, especially if you have that information, like putting it in workshop form. I'm sure so many people would appreciate that, or do appreciate that. Especially because you're talking about time and money, right? And and that's really some of the key metrics of business is time and money. And I imagine in civic engagement too, and any really most of space just in general, I would imagine. That's really great. Then, so how long have you been with Imagine MKE then? Is it?
I actually just celebrated my first year 2 weeks ago. So October 7th was my 1 year anniversary. And the first year, Imagine is really interesting because we're approaching this work in a different way, really focusing on a collective impact agenda. So it's not us as a staff deciding what is the plan and the best way forward. It's us as a community with the staff person from Imagine MKE deciding what are the things we want to do and how do we incrementally push this ball up the hill together. And so definitely that has been a learning curve, being someone who also owns their own business, where I get to set the strategy and then I get to hire people who help me implement my strategy. That's not the work of Imagine MKE, and I'm super grateful for that because I get to work with amazing artists who come in by way of our work group. So we have 4 different work groups: marketing and PR, our public policy work group, which I will be honest, if I didn't have the director of artist support work group, I would probably be on the public policy work group, because policy, for all of the reasons that we're talking about, is so interesting to me. There are policies that, that make it difficult for a musician to busk.
Yeah, those are the systems like you're talking
Those
about.
are the systems, right? And so how do we create a system and get enough support from the policy level to create the system that's necessary for artists to thrive? For me, I am somebody in my personal life and professional life, I believe in multiple streams of revenue. Mm-hmm. And so, asking artists to be reliant on just performance money or touring money, right? Well, now you can't tour. And so what are other opportunities available for artists across disciplines to still be able to make their money? For artists who were working as a musician in the evening, but, bar back, during the week in the evenings or whatever that looked like, the hospitality industry was crushed, right? Like, you're not really going to a bar in the same way that you were, February 26th. And so, I think the public policy group is really interesting. Of course, you have artist support and outreach, which is my work group, which has the largest concentration of actual working artists. And then you have Antoine's group, which is neighborhood partnerships. And so how do we engage art in different neighborhoods? And how do we create thriving opportunities for art to be in other neighborhoods that maybe people don't often think of?
Can you expand more on what you said about how it's a community, and is that what you were saying? Is that the community has some sort of involvement in the strategies of what you guys are deciding to do? Is that what you're saying? That there's so how does that work? Because I can imagine directors and everyone in a nonprofit, like, I have an understanding of like what that might look like, but so do you call upon? Is that what those groups were that you were talking about, or the stuff?
So it's an open call, right? So for folks who come to the Imagine website or see us at an event and are like, hey, we want to get more engaged in your work, we'll say, cool, like, let's have a conversation. So we'll talk to someone. It could be myself or my colleague, Mac. We get an idea of what they're interested in doing, and we direct them to the work group that seems to fit that interest. And so if it's, again, policy or I should also mention that our strategies came about over a 1 to 2 year period of this consulting group talking with artists at large about what was missing from the space. And so once they kind of convened all of this information, it was like, well, what's the best way of acting on this? And so it was determined collective impact agenda, work groups. And again, essentially you come through, you say you want to be involved in our work groups, and you decide which work group you want to be in. And from there, you're helping to move the agenda forward. So when we meet, at the end of our meeting, we ask folks to commit to an action commitment. So one thing you can do, it could be bring a person to the next meeting. It could be connect us to someone in your network who understands funding for artists or grants for artists. Whatever your contribution is that leads to the ultimate goals of the group, let's do that. And then you have me checking in with you throughout that period, like, well, hey, how's it going? Do you need any support? That type of thing. And the idea is that if everybody is doing their little piece, when we come together again, it's like, great, we've accomplished this. What do we think we should tackle next? Or how do we move this even further?
So you're saying that this is you specifically go for artists or just people in that particular sector that you're focusing on or something, or just anyone around? Like, if any artists around Milwaukee, how would they be able to get involved in that and join those groups? Or
any artist, any community member. It could just be a community member who's not an artist, but who loves the arts and is like, hey, I want to be on the artist support work group. And so again, they will send us an email through our website or reach out to one of us if you know us on LinkedIn or what have you. And we would begin to have the conversation to see what it is you're interested in, how you want to, help out. And then we would go from there. So yeah, it's open to any artist across discipline at any level, but also any community member. This is about how do we create a thriving arts and culture sector, and everybody's voice helps in that process, because we don't just need people creating art, we also need people who want to enjoy art. And so people who want to go to a Cullah show or listen to Cullah's podcast or go to a photography exhibition on a weekend virtually now, but everybody has a voice in what Milwaukee's arts and culture scene can look like, so it can be thriving for both the supply and the demand side.
Yeah, I think that's a great vision. I think that's part of what keeps me here is I feel this sense, and I've seen it in amongst, we're talking about these pockets, little pockets, especially in the music scene that I've been in. I see that type of energy of there are people here in this city working night and day to make an impact, to imagine, a Milwaukee and I think the first time I experienced it or understood it was the people's flag. I guess seeing the people's flag around it was able for me to. That was something that I was able to have a symbol of, like a forward, like what is the future, or like what is the culture. This is the people. This isn't that, and then to see that there's a complete disconnect between the flag itself and how it's everywhere, and then the actual but then the actual policies and governing bodies that are making the deciding what the flag is or whatever, they're not even. I think they went to like even do it again to try and vote on another one. Like they're not even adopting it. It just seems strange, and that to me that was like a microcosm of, the people has to start and make them. They have to decide what the future is, right, and what they want. And so I think that's a really beautiful thing that you're built into your into Imagine MKE's vision of how to affect changes, to listen to. I mean, that seems very. It seems pretty obvious, at it, but I don't. I guess I don't have too much experience in the nonprofit world, but I would imagine that helps a lot. And I like your point about making sure you listen to listeners as opposed to listening to artists all the time, because sometimes the artists like to play and do different things than what people actually want. When you're jamming with the musicians and you're in your own world of stuff, sometimes it's not as enjoyable for some people, in my experience. But yeah, that I think that's great. So anyone can just go on and for any particular topic of any concern they have, like of something in this. Well, that's great. Yeah, that's great. Because someone messaged and asked about what's an just right before you were describing that, asked what's an opportunity for a new artist to help with community issues like racism. So I would imagine, especially with the, like you were mentioning, the Black is Beautiful like parade and all these musicians who are able to come up with ideas to help bring people together. Would that be something that an artist could do to help with that issue? Is try and reach out to you guys and see if they could address that and have that as part of an agenda for you guys, or policy item to like focus on?
So right now, all of the strategy points that connect to our work group are on our website at ImagineMKE.org. So people can kind of see what are the strategy points that we're looking at. I would suggest for that individual that they run to the website, take an idea of look and see what we have there. I know for sure in November, we're doing a convening where we look at all of the work that we've done over the past year and see if this is the best, and see if we need to revise some of the strategy points, especially to match where we're at now in COVID. So that's one piece. I would say the other piece is for artists who have a project in mind. So they are like, I want to do the next iteration of a Black is Beautiful sleigh ride because soon we'll have snow. Hello, Wisconsin. And so
some reindeer.
Let's say they have a project in mind, but
Sure.
they are like, I need a fiscal sponsor. I need a fiscal receiver. That might be something that we can support them with as well. Or just the amplification of the project that they're doing. So just look, we view ourselves as a chamber of commerce for arts and culture. So we are here to align, connect, and convene. And so if you feel like the work group is not the best place for you, you've got a project in mind, you need some other resources, try us out. Shoot me an email, K Hickman, HICKMAN at ImagineMKE.org. And let's do a virtual call because it is not safe for me to be outside. So let's do a virtual call and let's see what we can do.
Great. Yeah. That's a wonderful thing because I think I had heard of Imagine MKE, but it really was until until the coronavirus really hit that I like really heard about it. And then all of a sudden I was hearing about it all the time. But it sounds like the institution's been around for how long has it been around? I guess
for a year. So there were 2 years.
Oh, so because you said you've only been there for a year.
Yeah, just for a year. So I was the last hire in August.
Okay.
I think.
Well, then I feel better that I hadn't heard of it.
Yeah, no, we'd only been around for a year. I mean, the work is ambitious. And again, we had these strategy points of things that we were working on, and then COVID hit. And to be honest, like when COVID hit, so let's see, I did my last work group. I had my last work group meeting in person. And that weekend, so that was probably on a Thursday, that Sunday, we were told we were working home indefinitely. And when we came back on Monday, so that Sunday we got that message. That Monday, we were like, let's do the artist relief fund starting Wednesday. And this was before the safer at home order even went into play. So I think even for Imagine, we had but we had already started hearing murmurings of shows being canceled for folks. And again, this was before the safer at home order even hit here in Wisconsin. And so we had to pivot really quickly from the work we thought we would be doing, preparing for DNC. We are developing an artist marketplace with Book Live, but that was going to be the catalyst for DNC. Once that hit, I mean, we were all kind of in limbo. So this artist relief fund really happened within 48 hours. And, it's incredible how the community supported that and how we were able to get every artist who we approved the amount of money that they asked for. That was incredible, but that was also a very huge pivot because obviously we didn't know that might become a function of what we even needed to do.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing that at least you guys had the foresight to know. I would imagine there were safer at home type things that were starting to come out, right? Like, and in Europe, at least we already knew that they had already done all that. And
yep, in Europe, I think we were just starting to see our first couple cases stateside, I think, and in Milwaukee. But at that point, early March, mid-March, it was still, there was definitely some mixed messaging. What we knew for sure was that regardless to what the messaging that was coming to us, we knew that artists in real time, their events were being canceled. Everything from arts fairs to concerts, to cooking demos, to photo exhibitions, like things were starting to be canceled, that week before our safer at home order went into effect.
Yeah, and here we are in October.
I mean, I saw an incredible news story last week because I'm also a newsie. That shouldn't be a surprise if I like to watch PBS. But who is the artist? Is it Diplo? Diplo is going to be doing virtual concerts with dancers. So this news story.
I've been seeing him on Twitch. He's been doing it. They're ridiculous.
And so he's looking at doing like a national show now. And so this news show was showing the behind the scenes of his human dancers on a green screen, the motion sensors on them like you see for like the athletes doing video games, preparing for this full concert. about a month or so ago, Megan Thee Stallion did a concert virtually at a performance venue, huge performance venue through Live Nation, selling tickets. I think that from the arts and culture perspective, I think now is the time to really begin having conversations about what do shows look like for us. I don't think the answer is no shows. I think and how do we get back to setting the precedent that folks cannot put money in a tip jar, right? Like we're like 7-8 months into it. And so, there's some folks who still haven't received their unemployment checks, right? Like so like people need to be paid. We need to get back to paying our artists for the work that we're consuming. So there's that piece. We've got to start having these conversations and building out the system for that. But the other thing is, folks should go to ivotedfestival.com, RSVP, so that you can attend the free concert on November 3rd to hear some incredible music from musicians all over the country.
Yeah, I think there's like 600 artists almost, or 500 to 600, somewhere around there. And you get access to all of it, right? Like
the amount of musicians who said yes, the amount of work that Emily and her team put in to find out who are these artists.
Right.
I love the fact that she was incredibly deliberate in reaching out to Wisconsin artists, because I think from my experience as an artist manager,
she's a Scotty. She's got it in her.
Yes, right. She's a Wisconsin girl. And so, but I think that oftentimes Milwaukee musicians and Wisconsin musicians are sometimes limited to you're good enough for a Milwaukee artist, or you're great to be from Wisconsin, as if
I've gotten that before.
Right?
Many times.
Right?
Well, you must be the best thing out of Wisconsin. I'm like, have you had? I don't know. I don't even know where to start. But
right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I appreciate so much that Emily was incredibly intentional about including Wisconsin artists across music disciplines. So from your North Side trap rappers, right. She reached out to them, and to your folk artists, she reached out to them. Everybody who is making music and has a following.
Right.
So I think that's incredible work.
Well, yeah,
so it should be a fun night.
That's just, I totally agree. And when I saw a lot of the lineup and stuff, I was very, very confused. Or I asked her on the podcast, I was like, what's going on? And then it's all, from my understanding, she's using real data, and like, it's not just cherry picking people because she likes them. It's like, oh no, like Wisconsin's a swing state. We need to reach actual people. Who do actual people listen to? So those are the people that we need to talk to. And that seems very, it seems a little like unorthodox, but it shouldn't be. It's, it's like, that's not, but now maybe they have the tools that maybe we haven't had in previous, election cycles or previous things, the ability to, like, I went on and saw the Chartmetrics website that they were using, that they partnered with. And artists, at least at the time, a few months ago, they were giving out free month trials for artists, and I was able to see every single platform that I was on, YouTube, Spotify, all that stuff. It was comprehensive from all of time, cross-referencing them, the amount of data that was crazy. Like, I would imagine as not a artist manager anymore, but but for an artist manager or any artist in general, like, even the data that you get there looking at it is useful from just the free version. I'm a huge data nerd, and I'm glad that that's a metric for, like, that's what people are focusing on, because it's just the right solution. But you mentioned that you're a PBS girl, so what have you been watching on PBS lately? What's the go-to?
Well, I'm a sucker for PBS NewsHour, for sure. Right.
That's classic.
I definitely love POV documentaries, American experience documentaries. Yeah, I love documentaries. And so
Same.
those are the primary shows. Every once in a while, I'll catch some of the local shows. So Around the Corner with John McGivern, or Black Nouveau, that actually I did an episode of Black Nouveau for post promotion for Our City Your Vote back in 2018. And
So you're
I
really a
almost had
PBS
a heart
girl.
attack.
You've been on
Yeah,
PBS.
I almost had a heart attack when they invited me on the set because I'm like, oh my God, I'm talking to James Causey and Joanne Williams. I'm going to lose it. Yeah, I totally nerded out.
Yeah, I've always been a PBS fan since I was a kid. We never had cable. My dad was always turning it on. He's like, there's no commercials. Like, although they do have commercials now, more than when I was a kid, I feel like. But yeah, having the local shows is pretty amazing. And that, like, if someone tried to pitch PBS to people now, like, I feel like people would go crazy and say it's like communism or something. You know what I mean? It's like, no, like, it's just you know what I mean? Imagine if people were trying to pitch that. Oh no, we have like locally shows and we just distribute it, like the library. It's like a mind. It's like,
I prefer it to some of the other networks. So I don't have cable either. So I have like a little digital antenna, but like
you can just use a coat hanger. I've used a coat hanger before. I stick a coat hanger into a coax, like the end of a coax cable, and I plug it in. It works.
What is happening? No.
No. It would, dude. I got full HD when I was on the east side. Full HD from a coat hanger, straight up.
I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stick with my Chromecast and just watching TV on the apps because that.
It was a problem when there was cars. Cars would come by and and the thing would disrupt. So I think there must have been some. I think they call it electromagnetic interference. That's what I'm assuming. But not everybody could do that. I was living in Cambridge Woods or whatever, which is just that neighborhood right across from Riverside High School.
Oh, okay. I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, it's like a few blocks away from all those giant antennas, like TV antennas. So I think that's part of the reason.
Exactly what you're talking about.
I think that's part of the reason. But yeah, Chromecast is a game changer. When I got Chromecast, everything changed about how I like experience like that stuff. I don't know, it blew my mind. And I still have it now. Like on my family's house, every TV has a Chromecast, and they're so cheap and so small and like easy.
Yes.
It's so much more reliable than the Amazon stuff because every app can do it. Like every app can just Chromecast. I can Chromecast from my browser on my computer. Like is before the only option was HDMI cables to your laptop, or to your phone. Before that, I would get get a little adapter for your phone to do HDMI into there, but the Chromecast just makes it all better. So you watch documentaries then through Chromecast too?
Yep, through Chromecast. Just this morning, I caught 60 Minutes.
Sure.
Through the CBS app. I love 60 Minutes. So yeah, I use Chromecast for pretty much everything. My Hulu, my Netflix, Google Play sometimes if I want to purchase a movie from there. I've also watched some series of TV shows through that. I think that's how I finished Sons of Anarchy a couple years ago.
I never saw that one. I heard it was good though.
Oh, it is good.
That's like
did not.
They're biker gangs, right? Like it's like a biker gang. Yeah.
I didn't think I'd be into it, but it was wild. You really fall in love with the characters.
Yeah, that's just good writing. Yeah, that's what I heard.
I'll tell you what's been my latest obsession. I mean, I feel like we're friends now. We've been talking for
it's been an hour.
For an hour. We're friends now. So because I don't have cable and I like ambient noise in the background while I work, I've been watching a lot of Iron Life, which is channel 55 on regular TV. And it's just a binge watch of cop shows every day. It's incredible. Like NCIS, Chicago PD, Law and Order SVU, Law and Order Criminal Intent.
Sure.
And it's so bad that I'm starting to think that this world is a scary place. For example, quick story. Yeah. One of my coworkers sent all of us insomnia cookies. Ooh. And so I received a text message on my phone like, your insomnia cookies are at your front door near your mailbox. And immediately my mind said, someone has stolen my identity through my DoorDash, has ordered cookies and sent them to me. Like, when you step back from that, it's like, why did your mind go to 20? Why would someone steal your card, send you cookies, and then send you a reminder that cookies are there? Isn't that how, like...
It's a very nice, that's a very, very nice identity thief. Right? Yeah.
Very nice thief. I told my partner, I was like, babe, I've got to stop watching these cop shows because I really think the world is a horrible place now.
Yeah, I heard that from someone. They were saying that like that's part of a lot of the cultural rifts around cops are just because of these cop shows and like and issues of all the fake trials, or no, they're not fake trials. What are they called? All basically when the prosecution and the police are part of the same, like they have the same, what's the word? Like they require each other, right? So they're not gonna like why would they hurt each other? Or why would they arrest someone? Or why would someone get hurt when they're working together? And all that, the accountability. That's what word I was looking for. But I would imagine that has, you're saying this, this instant of identity theft, which sounds like was that a Criminal Intent show, or was that it could have been anything.
Criminal Intent, maybe CSI Miami without someone dying. It was really, and so the next day, so I didn't even go to my mailbox and check because I'm like, there's no cookies there. And then I saw that my coworker had emailed us like, hey, I sent you cookies. And I was like, oh, I'm such an idiot. I left those cookies there for 24 hours. Like,
oh, wow. But they're still good?
I don't know. They were very crispy.
Okay,
and I was like, I don't
know
that I should eat these. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know my neighbors.
Better
Maybe
safe
they
than
did
sorry.
something to the box. I don't know. I don't know these people.
It was already suspect from the beginning, right? Like, who sent me cookies? It's like
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm like, I gotta stop watching these cop shows. I really, maybe I need to switch to Cubo.
I've heard about Cubo.
Cubo is, on regular TV, it's like what PBS used to be. So a bunch of cartoons and stuff during the day for little ones. So
they
maybe
got
I
some
need
old
more
shows on like MeTV. Sometimes has some good stuff, like some real good old shows.
You are speaking my language now. When I lived at home with my mom this summer, I found Murder, She Wrote, Alf.
Alf, I know.
Alf is good stuff. In the Heat of the Night and Matlock. Those final crime scenes, those scenes in the courtroom where like Matlock is pretending to be all docile, like he doesn't know like what's happening. But it's like, and so I get really excited because I'll be like, yes, Matlock is about to get him. And you really should not be hyped up about Matlock.
That's some dramatic irony. Yeah. When you know, but they don't know. And you're in the audience just going, come on.
Yes. I'm like, he knows he's out to get you. So I can't believe that in a professional setting, I just acknowledged that I get geeked off of Matlock. But here we are.
No, I get geeked on that stuff too. I was I mute the commercials though. I can't stand some of those commercials. I have to mute it during the commercials. But I was just watching some great show, or no, it was just Carol Burnett on MeTV. And Carol Burnett, like, I knew she was hilarious. I saw some stuff, but there was one scene she did where it was just like she was just a really lonely woman in a bar, and like she was drunk out of her mind, and it was just sad. And it was parts of it was funny, but it was like you could tell she was really speaking some truth with like her. I didn't realize how amazing of an actor she was too, or she is. But I think, or no, she's still around, or did
she's definitely still around, Cullah. She's definitely still around.
Yeah, I thought I saw her. But she, it was really, really, like, you don't get that stuff in, I don't know. I couldn't see that in a talk show now. Someone really talking about some psychological pain that's common. You see it everywhere, right? And she was able to, like, bring it, and it really was heavy. But it was so important. I don't know. I felt it from her, like the intention, like of like, no, I'm trying to like send a message about, just the loneliness and the drunkenness and how lost people can be, right? And like and how desperate people are and all that stuff. It was beautiful. But then I watched the documentary after that. and it was all on. Yeah, I'm not sure if it was on MeTV, but it was on just a regular. I was up in Manitowish waters with a buddy fishing, and we were at some motel, and that was there, and I was like, no, like let's watch the MeTV. He's like, well, yeah, you have a lot in common with my grandparents. I'll be like, well, your grandparents seem like great people, but
someone said that to me,
really?
and I was only kind of offended because I'm like,
Yeah.
it's true. I watched this episode.
I was only kind of offended too. I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'll give you a
also don't know
pass.
good TV.
Yeah, I'll
You
give
don't
you
know
a
good
pass.
TV because Murder She Wrote. Like
That's
again,
classic.
I get excited. But I'm also the girl screaming at the TV when like the killer is trying,
Yeah.
the old man killer is trying to like take Angela Lansbury for a nightcap. I'm like, don't do it, Angela. He's the killer. Don't. I shouldn't be this hype.
No,
And when people see this, they're gonna be like, we cannot believe Kennita just talked about Matlock.
see, to me, it shows the depth of your appreciation of art. So like,
Thank you, Cullah.
so then who else would you want? Someone who's not passionate about art, like helping with the art scene? Like that doesn't make sense. But
My depth of history, it goes in all across sectors.
the documentary I saw was about sharks, and I didn't know this, but this is a mind-blowing fact to me, at least. Sharks are older than trees. Like sharks have been around for 350 million years, and trees have only been around for 250 million years. Like
What?
yeah, dude, sharks are older than trees. Blew my mind. My
mind is blown.
And then I realized I was like, oh well, the history, like the super ancient geological history. Well, it's not ancient history, but pre-humans, the beginning of the Earth was all water, right? That's what they're saying. So I guess that makes sense. Like if it was all water, only water. So then my next question is, okay, well, what about underwater trees? Like, like our underwater plants, they got to be older than the sharks then. So I haven't looked that up. I haven't looked that up, but I'm sure they are, right? I would imagine. Although, who knows? I thought sharks would definitely be not as old as trees. I just imagine trees are really, really, really old. But the great white shark, especially, they say that they've 350 million years old is like a fossil they found of a shark, just like a great white shark.
Wow.
So that's they've been around for a while. So that's the stuff you can learn. That's the stuff you can learn on just your regular antenna TV. And
regular antenna TV.
And I remember like talking to so many kids growing up who did have cable. They didn't even know it existed. They didn't even know. They thought all you had to have cable. That they didn't even know that all this stuff was free. That
My mom is one of those people.
She was just pure cable.
She continues to insist that I need cable, that I don't have a full functioning home because I don't have cable. And I'm like, Mom, you can survive without cable.
This thing called the internet. It's better than cable.
Call the internet. Exactly.
Well, that's where I watched my documentaries. I've been watching on YouTube. Excuse me. There's varying degrees of, efficacy of them or how deep people go into it, or some of them are just sensational, but you can find some good YouTubers who are like real scholars or anthropologists or whatever, or real historians, and there's some really amazing like content that's generated on a weekly basis by some incredible people who do really good work and stuff that I'm really interested in. I'm a huge nerd when it comes to like early Christian mysticism and like all the stuff like and like ancient Persia and I've been trying to learn more about the ancient history of us. It's like you're saying, the history is so important of like knowing where we are, or even knowing the context, whether it's how did our language get, why are we saying these words that we're saying, what do they even mean, why are they even here? Or something recently is like, well, what happened 4 years ago in the most recent election, and how does that affect now? Like, I don't know. There's it seems endless, right? Even though there probably is a finite amount of time, but like they're just discovering things are older and older and older than originally thought. Like not only like 10, 15 years ago, they thought humans were only around, like had civilization only, like the ancient Sumerians was the earliest one, or like, and that's only, within 10,000 years. But now they're finding giant cities that are like buried with space archaeology. Have you heard space archaeology? It's like
No.
there's these satellites that can essentially just take pictures of topographical maps of Earth, and then they use, but they don't. It's not just pictures. They also do like infrared and all these other technologies, and then they put them through algorithms to like filters essentially that can change and show the difference in topography or the difference in the materials of what's there, and you can find whole
That's
plots
cool.
of land, and you can find like, oh, this is all farm, but we can see there is all these ancient sites in these farms. Like you can still see them, like through even sometimes through a town will be on a bigger plot, and they're discovering new sites like every day now because of that. And they
This is riveting.
and now they have stuff called LiDAR, which is like light radar, essentially. Radar is radio waves, sonar is sound, and LiDAR is light. And I was blown away by that. I was like, LiDAR? Come on now.
So I've heard of LiDAR. I was watching an episode of some show on the National Geographic, and a site had been, the original architecture had been moved. And so they were able to use LiDAR to kind of reconstruct it as to what it was formerly. And I was like, that is, yeah. I mean, I love a good documentary or a good piece of history. I mean, it just makes for interesting fun facts that even if I don't share with anyone else, I'm just kind of archiving for the next time we can go out to parties.
Yeah, right. Well,
Yes.
at the very least, like it's what you're saying earlier about it changes your perception of reality, where it's like, oh, all these things have happened in history. These are possible, or like this is. And I was just looking at that today about some black slave revolts, like black female slave revolts, and all these different things that were happening, things that people don't even know about, right? Like that can just having that knowledge of that perception of something like that happened, or like having more detailed accounts, or it being part of the zeitgeist of what people feel. Like I feel like those are really important points, and that's part of the history is written by the winners, all right, or the conquerors, or the stuff. And so we gotta also be very cautious of like what history we're accepting of even ourselves, of who we are and where we even came from. And when things are just drastically changing, like paradigm shifting is happening across all historical and anthropological disciplines, it's like that gives a little hope for the future, I think, for me at least. Like, okay, it seems like there's a very tumultuous time, but things are changing towards and there are people like yourself and people who are putting in the time and looking for and have a vision for the future that is a positive one, where we're not in a civil war, and it's not World War III, and it's not another pandemic, and it's not all this stuff. And I think that's important to know, because I think it's like what you're saying, combination of the social medias plus a lot of these dramatic shows, and the politics of fear, that's going around, like, is really helping to divide us. And if we can just know, we hear these, at least for me, when I hear these historical contexts of like the early Gnostic mysticism and their interpretations of what the Adam and Eve story was, and how it completely changes the role of man and woman in the myth of origin. Like those are like those are huge shifts of perception and perspective of like who are we and why are we even here? And those are the types of things through music and arts I think people can communicate these stories and these powerful images and powerful historical context too. Like, man, sometimes I just watch some of these videos and hear about these stories and be like, man, if there was like an opera about this, or if there was like a music, and I know that they did like Manuel, what's his name? I can't say it. Lin-Manuel Miranda. Yeah, I was like, I knew there's one. Like some of this historical fiction, through art, there are probably more people now that know so many of the president's names that didn't know before, just because of that musical, and they know more about the historical context of what through art. And I think especially now, when it might be more, I think not as many people are history buffs, or maybe they're not as nerdy about it, but that's I think where art and culture come, because everyone still likes to watch the show, and everyone still likes to come and experience music, and so that's an interesting thing. I try to do that in my songs sometimes. Well, I'll just have a message, and it'll be a very like the feeling of the song will be totally contrasted with what the song is. It'll be like a very happy song in its composition, but it's about a very sad, tragic thing. And people, when people come and say, "Oh, I really love that song," I'll be like, "Oh, I wonder what happens."
What
or
you
like,
got from it?
yeah. Like I'm always wondering, like, because it makes it palatable, I think, to like talk about those things sometimes. And that goes back to like what you're saying about classic and other people being very flexible with how they can express their art. Like for me, I felt that way of navigating around the scene too, because it felt like for me, I had to be a rock band or something to like be in all the bars, and like to be like, oh, to play. I was like, okay, so I need to form a rock band. That's like what I need to do. And I like a lot of rock music, so and I'm able to play lots of different types of music, and so I started a band that was more rock and like funk rock focused or whatever, that would be able to compete with a loud, drunken, like patronage of a bar, right? So, and just after a year of doing that, I was able to like really understand more about what performance was and like how to even do it. And then from there, I was able to be more flexible to be able to say, okay, I can see this now. I can move towards and have a folk group too. And then that has a completely, like both of those, now I have two options of different bands that I can choose from, and they have completely different palettes really of like, and different strategies of how you could pitch them to different types of venues. Like I think about, because I just saw how big folk music was too, and I love it, but like just saw how big it's, how many festivals just constantly all across Wisconsin, all these big bluegrass and folk festivals, and it just seems so much passion and so much, and there's a lot of the music that I liked, and so I was like, oh, let me try that, and it's I think that's bring it back to that point. The flexibility of that can come from, can lend yourself to at least being able to have the choices. But I never really, I guess I just moved into River West and I was just like, oh, let's play it in River West. There's like 5 venues around, and most of them are some of them are clearly just rock, like some of them, but some are more open. Like you said, Linneman's sometimes is open to certain things, but it's very much like you said, the more like folk oriented and rock oriented and stuff. I'd say they do have a lot of world music sometimes, but there's jazz and stuff there too. But company brewing, I've seen a very wide variety of types of music there, and I think that would definitely lend itself to something that people should think about, right? And at least in terms of art and how to make a sustainable career, and like without jeopardizing the honesty of what you as an artist are, of course. Like, and I think that might be what might be the issue for a lot of people. It's like, well, if you're in one lane and you like that, and it's like, why would I can't, it's not where your heart is at to try and like just all of a sudden change your genre or something, right? Like I would imagine that.
To your point, understanding the history, I think, of Milwaukee and Wisconsin music.
Right.
So there's a reason why there's certain bands that fare a little better at, let's say, a Summerfest. And what made me remember it is hearing you mention competing with loud, maybe inebriated
maybe
listeners, maybe. Maybe
Definitely.
they pregame on the flyer on the way to Summerfest.
This is Milwaukee.
And so, so I was vice president of WAMI, the Wisconsin area music industry, for a couple years. And it gave me, at that time, they were maybe about 35 years old or so. And so I had the opportunity to just learn about the history of Wisconsin's music scene. And Wisconsin is a country, cover, tribute, polka, Americana, bluegrass, like those. Right. And when you go to Summerfest, like Summerfest is a very, I think, clear example of what genres fare the best in Milwaukee, because these are the bands that you often see booking time after time, blues and rock.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a history to all of the genres represented in Milwaukee and represented across Wisconsin. And I think, again, I was just talking about it in the music context, but even in the visual arts context, me working at Imagine MKE, I've gotten to meet women like Evelyn Patricia Terry and Della Wells, who are Black women painters and artists, visual artists, who have work placed in, nationally and internationally. And prior to my connection to Imagine MKE, I wouldn't have even known that we had thriving visual artists in Milwaukee.
Right.
I purchased my first original painting since working at Imagine MKE. And so I think for artists across disciplines, understanding the history and learning about the folks who've paved the way, it also helps inform you on how to navigate the space. And I'm a big fan of mentors. And so when I was in Whammy, I learned a lot from my fellow board members who were older white men who were still gigging on the weekends. And now I get to learn a lot from artists of other disciplines at Imagine MKE who help school me on, the history of artists, painters in Milwaukee, of Black artists in Milwaukee, and what that looks like. And again, how that's informed what it looks like now. And so I think understanding that is invaluable. And it, again, helps you, to your grandpa's point, helps you figure out where you're going.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd seen some exhibitions at No Studios of some artists, but I didn't know they were internationally, placed and things from here in Milwaukee. And I feel like that's like a Milwaukee thing. It's like people don't even know about the people from here. What's up with that?
Yeah. I mean, even when you mentioned the exhibition at No Studios, there was one by Cullah. And Cullah is the Photography Alliance. And I had a meeting with them early on when I started. I was just trying to meet folks. I was trying to meet the leaders of convening orgs across disciplines, just to kind of figure out, because, in our art scene, you have folks who are connected to a convening org, but then you have artists who prefer to remain individual and remain solo and not do the membership-based thing. But Cullah has internationally recognized photographers, and they did an exhibition, and oh my gosh, these are some incredible photos. And again, for me, starting off as a music writer, going into artist management, like most of my 21-year career, which is kind of weird to say that because I'm only 36, but most of my 21-year career has been music, specifically hip hop, R&B, and rock. So not knowing about the photographers and the painters and the sculptors and the podcasters, I mean, we have such a diverse but also siloed artist community. And gosh, I'm just really hoping that my role at Imagine MKE helps to build some type of system for everybody to have access to opportunities and money.
Yeah.
There's money out there. How do we help make sure folks get access to it?
Yeah, I think that would make everyone's ears perk up when you say that, and that's just because it's true. It's like, and I think that's a really good insight about all the different disciplines of art and how they all have a role in the culture. And I've met some painters and some and I've always just been fascinated. I was like, what if there were like how can all the different disciplines come together in some sort of cohesive way where they can help each other out and do that? And there is, for me as a musician, it's like, okay, well, I can commission works for my projects, and I know there are people that will do that, and every single song can have their own piece that you can get technically if you really want. But at least for albums, I've been trying to. The past few years, I've been going with just Milwaukee artists to just, and I've done that for a little bit since 2015, I think was the first time I worked with a Milwaukee artist. But just working with them and stuff and just feeling, I'm like, man, what it would be, it would be fun if you could just have like a painter and a musician up on a stage, and then the painter just paints something and the musician sings or plays what he sees, or like, and they just like do cross-discipline improv. I don't know. That might be a disaster. It might not be very interesting, but
it could also be really cool. I mean, sometimes
if there's
cool
really
things
talented
happen out of
people,
disasters.
yeah, there's some really talented people that I'm sure would be able to do it. I'm not as like, there's some improv musicians and people that I've seen who would probably be able to do some crazy stuff with that and make it fun and make it sing. But that was just one little insight of like, I wonder how them can work together. Like, how can a sculptor work with a musician, and how can all those things, because they're just such different mediums. And there's such a disconnect, right? And I think that's where part of the feeling was like, wow, there's so many things out there, and I feel a camaraderie with it. Like, I can see the art and I can imagine it, because all art has very similar, like they're all very similar in a lot of ways. Of course, they're different domains and different disciplines and different modalities, but like the process is still very much similar. When I talk to painters and stuff, they describe it and how it happens, and I'm like, that's exactly what happens to me. So that there's obviously a similar type of inspirational aspect to it, and discipline and working with techniques and texture and all that stuff. Like, I'm sure all those, any sort of word that can describe all that stuff. But I always wondered. So that it's good to know that there's, like, I don't know, that's it. Hearing more about the Imagine MKE and about the work that you've done these past 20 years or whatever it was, that sounds very promising. Sells Milwaukee even better to me, even though I'm here. But it's like, there's people who want to make this a beautiful place. And I was, through No Studios, actually, I was asked to talk at and have a conversation with one of their podcasts with Chris Messina, who's the hashtag proprietor, I guess, or he was the first person to push the hashtag usage in Twitter. They were already hashtag usages in these old internet chat relay things and stuff, and there was already usages of it, but Twitter hadn't implemented it. Now Twitter is they popularized it, right? This idea of a hashtag, and even hashtag I voted, right? Like, everyone's using that stuff. And he's an open architecture guy, and he was tech guy, and he was giving a keynote speech, and he was talking about what he saw in Milwaukee just from being there for a few days. And he mentioned, because he's just been in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley through multiple busts and bubble bursts and stuff, and and he's like, it's bursting right now. Like, no one wants to be here. Everyone's leaving. This, like, the politics and the homelessness there is insane. Like, I went there only a few years ago, and I was like suggested to download an app to look at where the feces is in the city so you can avoid them. Like, seriously, like, that's the level, that's where they're at right now. But they would rather make an app to look at the feces than solve the problem. But
right, clean it up.
Yeah. But anyway, he was talking about Milwaukee, and he gave this very interesting point of, like, Milwaukee is in this unique position, especially juxtaposing it to, like, San Francisco or New York or LA or something, where there's already huge establishment there. Like, the establishment in Wisconsin is, like, polka bands and all those things, where it's like there is such room to move forward and with a culture, and to make lead potentially even the country, like, lead, like, you're talking, and especially knowing the history, like, and giving the historical context of the Selma of the North and all this stuff, where it's like, no, there is historical, really unique history. Even the American Socialist Party being a huge part of the mayoral, like, position, all these different initiatives and different ways of thinking here that has allowed us to become something different from a lot of other cities. And he was just basically giving this pitch of, like, hey, like, you're in a unique position as a city that not a lot of other cities can be in or are in, and it is to make something of this city. Like, it's like happening. Things are growing really fast. And it's like, okay, what can actually happen, and how far is it going to go? And I could, it seems it seems a little incalculable when you talk about all the different people and the movements and the culture and what could it be? You know, it seems like a dream, but then putting that in context with Imagine MKE and like seems like that's a pretty, at least a good model of just like, hey, no, listen to the people and help them do what they need to do, because ultimately it's the people that need the help and they're the ones that are going to lead, right? Like,
yes, and I think that's the important part in the collective impact agenda, that we are the backbone organization. So we're
right.
here to give the things structure, but we really can't move without
Right.
our stakeholders and community partners at the table. And, you know, similar work has been attempted here in Milwaukee before, but aside from the community saying, this is what we want, and then a group of folks trying to make that happen, the work is really daunting. And so I think if we were to try any other approach where I was kind of tasked with making all these things happen for artists, I think we'd all, as a collective at Imagine MKE, be really daunted by it. As I was listening to you talk about systems and things like that, one of the things that keeps me awake at night is we have artists like you and other artists here in the city. We have filmmakers here in the city. How do artists like you score films?
I'd like to know that question. I said I would love to know that question, or the answer to that question.
Like, where is so there's an obvious gap, whether that's us needing to make sure artists like you are signed up with the licensing org or a licensing company and having your music there, and having these filmmakers know that this is where you can go to license music. You know, how do we make sure that Milwaukee folks are doing the graphics for these films as they come out? I think we have a lot of the players. We just don't have the system and the pathways to each other made. And so when I think about systems, that's what I'm thinking about. Knowing that you have, you know, if you're doing a film and you need craft services, you know, we have caterers. And so like, how do we do the things that folks in other spaces are doing? How do we get away from the idea that we need somebody in Chicago to make this happen for us when we have all of the opportunities here? I know we have a licensing company here who licenses music. So how do artists get their music there? And again, how do we make sure that the folks who need music, whether it's advertising companies or, you know, independent films being made, how do they know that that's where they need to go? And so when I think about systems, those are the things that I think about in terms of how do we make this function for everybody?
Yeah. The licensing is a really good point. And if you meet any filmmakers, let them know that all my licenses are under Creative Commons license, so they're free. My music is put in films and things every day on YouTube. People are using it and stuff, and it's totally free. And there are some Milwaukee creators on YouTube that I've seen that have used it. But I think just people aren't as familiar with that type of licensing, the open source. Well, it's called Creative Commons licensing, but it's based on open principles and stuff. And I did have just a little summary. I've been working on this project called Free Music Land, and it's essentially just my open licensing platform through the Creative Commons license, but a website where people can connect and upload their music and license them for free. But the only stipulation is attribution. So it's for a lot of DIY people, really, and for the sake of opening up the licensing. And why do you need a licensing company? Like when you have the artists there you can just download a license on Creative Commons site, and there you go. There's your license. Like, it's free. And but of course, you know, if it's a budgeted film and it's got all this stuff, right, and you have money for it, of course, then you probably need some different types of licensing. But I think that's the scoring the film is a different one. That's what I would like to be a part of. The one where it's like an original score for a good film, like that. That's something that I'm very interested in doing. That I've always been fascinated with that and love. I mean, I was just watching The Shining a couple days ago or 2 nights ago, And surprisingly enough, that film, all those songs in that film were placed. Like they were not original score. They were not original scores. They were because it just feels so crazy when you're in it. You're like it's these crazy. This crazy Polish composer did a lot of it. This wild music where it's so scary and suspenseful. I don't know if you've seen The Shining, but they've
No, I am not a horror movie person.
yeah, Shining is
But
kind of horror. It's not really horror. It's more just like, oh god. Like there's definitely some more yeah. There's definitely it's bored. I would maybe someone's probably listening, be like, it's 100% horror, but it could be.
it's
But
100% going to terrify Kennita.
it will terrify you. That's for sure. But whether it's horror or not, I don't know. But it's Stanley Kubrick, and that guy's a genius. You know, at least his films are, and the same songs, a lot of the same composers' work was done in a bunch of other really famous thrilling movies like Children of Men. If you ever saw Children of Men, that's an incredible movie. Really, really fascinating movie about like it's in the future in this like post-apocalyptic authoritarian regime in England where people have just become infertile and like women aren't having babies, and like there's this huge population, like terrifying population thing, and it's not, there's undertones of it that it could be on purpose, or like it could be like an authoritarian regime that's sterilizing people or something. But it follows the story of one young woman who like had a baby in this like underground rebellion, trying to move her and bring her to a safe place or something to like, and it's really trippy, but and kind of scary. But there's there were scenes where I'm just like, oh my god, this music is fantastically crazy and scary. And when I was having that same feeling watching The Shining, when I saw it was the same composer, I was like, oh my god, that guy who apparently only died a few months ago. It's tragically,
Aw.
which is too bad. But anyway, I don't want to get too lost in The Shining, but it's been about 2 hours now, so it was great to get to know you and to learn more about all the work that you're doing here in Milwaukee. It's been very enlightening for myself, and hopefully for all people listening. I definitely would encourage people to, and I might myself, after that pitch, like join the Imagine MKE and try and actually make a difference and engage with other people who want that. I think that's the beautiful thing of it. It's like it's hard for people to get together when they don't even know that there's so many people, their neighbors, that want the same thing, and that they would actually. I feel like once people are together, it's so much easier to keep it going. But and of course, 2 weeks from now is the election, and for I Voted, the I Voted festival, which I'll be performing at, and I don't know when yet, but it'll be on the 3rd in the Wisconsin stage, I'm assuming, and people will be able to access amazing Wisconsin acts, plus literally like huge names on this festival too, like big name Jim James, and like there's tons of people. You have to go and look at ivotedfestival.com, I think it is, right?
Yep, ivotedfestival.com. Go ahead and RSVP, and we can't wait to see you there. And to echo you, Cullah, yes, like definitely join us in our work at Imagine MKE. I mean, our vision of a great arts and culture sector is not complete without your input. So come.
I got a lot of ideas, Kennita. I got a lot of ideas.
Well, come on, come, we need them. And so, yeah, come help us do this work. Learn more about us at ImagineMKE.org.
Right on. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I'm gonna just end it here, and then I'll just say a couple of words to say goodbye to you again, Kennita. But I'm gonna end the stream right now. So bye. Thanks everyone for tuning in.